Hello, everyone, and welcome to Slash Film Daily for July 24th, 2018. On today's episode, we'll talk about what we've been up to at the water cooler and answer some listener mail in the mailbag. This is Slash Film Editor-in-Chief Peter Sciretta, and joining me on today's podcast is Managing Editor Jacob Hall.
Hello, hello.
Weekend Editor Brad Oman.
Hey, that's me.
Senior Writer Ben Pearson.
Hey, what's going on?
And writers Hoai-Tran.
Hey, everyone.
And Chris Evangelista.
Hello.
So before we get into things, guys, we had a bunch of emails come over, into our mailbag over the past week. First off, I want to say thank you for all the positive response to our James Gunn episode. Hopefully we did it well. We did have a couple people that did write in with some critiques. Jorge Z from Australia wrote in that he's a 42 years old man, and as you mentioned, time changes us. Not only that, having kids changes us even more. I don't really know what my opinion would be if I was 42 with no kids. I do know that if I was 28, I would be frustrated about all of this. Basically, he goes on to say that, having kids changes his perception of this whole James Gunn situation and making pedophile jokes. Admittedly, all of us here on the podcast, none of us have kids. So that is a valid viewpoint and worth mentioning, I think. Another email came in from Carrie P., who also praised our episode, our James Gunn episode. She wanted to play devil's advocate, as I sometimes do. She says, I have been in education for 14 years, and there is a federal push for teaching digital citizenship. We are going to do our best to educate our students that the footprint they leave on social media can have a huge effect on their future. A lot of the teenagers are fans of Marvel and James Gunn. This might be a good learning experience for them to see how comments they have made in the past can keep them from potential jobs and future successes. Also, I think a valid point, although I think it would be more valid if I feel like if everybody was on board with this being just, I guess. And one last email from L in Texas. We did this this podcast I think probably 2 weeks ago at this point, talking about leaving trash in a movie theater after you are done with the movie. Our opinions were all over the road with that. But L from Texas writes in that she had worked in a theater for 6 years. Most of the time spent as an usher. The chain that they worked for had a system for cleaning theaters on busy nights and days, which was called the 10-step system, in which if you have at least 5 ushers working to clean a theater, it requires 5 ushers to clean a theater. And she goes into this 10-step program. I'll leave the whole details in the show notes, but basically she says if everyone would just take what ushers would consider big trash out with them, that could eliminate an entire step here and would make things a lot easier. She also does go on to say that I threw a facetious devil's advocate during the discussion that if we all clean up their trash, that would result in less jobs, and she says that would not be the case. I was just kidding. Okay, that was just a joke. But anyways, do any of you guys have anything to say about any of these listener emails?
I wasn't here for the theater discussion, so I'll just say if you leave your trash in the theater, you're a monster. And that's it.
Yes, Jacob.
There's no case where it is okay to leave trash in the movie theater. That's a question, actually.
I mean, if the building is on fire and you have to run it out real quick, I guess that's a good reason. Otherwise,
then it would be more flammable.
Just treat your environment with respect, and not necessarily environment meaning nature, environment meaning the place you're in, and be aware there are people who have to deal with your messes. And you know what? The people who are cleaning up your messes have like 3 other jobs in the theater. I used to have friends who worked at theaters, and there was always a case where they were bouncing around things to do, and trashy theaters always made them stay late because they had to deal with other things as well. So I'm sympathetic for all the ushers and people working in theater who have to deal with people being slobs. It's gross. Don't do it. Be a human being.
Yeah, I think we can agree on that, Jacob. Anyways, let's jump into the water cooler. Let's start with what we've been doing. Chris, you traveled to see some seals over the weekend.
I sure did. Yes, we were all, not all of us, but a lot of us were in San Diego for Comic-Con. And before I went to San Diego, my wife mentioned there's a beach close to San Diego where you can just go and see seals and sea lions just hanging out. It's called La Jolla Cove. So when I had some downtime at Comic-Con, I hopped in a cab and I drove out there. It was about a 30-minute drive from where we were staying. And I don't know what I was expecting. I thought maybe I'll see one or two, but I got out of the cab and they were just everywhere. And they're just hanging out on rocks and chilling and swimming. And it was like magical because I don't know. I mean, like there are people there too, and there are people at the beach and they're swimming and the seals are swimming with the people. It was like something out of like this weird fairy tale that I was not expecting. And it really lifted my spirits while I was feeling down at Comic-Con. And then I went back to Comic-Con and had to get in a line and I was instantly miserable again. But for the brief time I spent just chilling with these animals, it was pretty damn nice. It made me realize, for most of the time, what I had seen of California was like, our hotel and the block that Comic-Con was on. But driving out to this part, it made me realize like, oh, California is actually very beautiful if you're not in a hotel room or in Hall H all day.
Yeah, if you're not stuck in the convention center. I once took a seal boat tour in San Diego, and I saw, I kid you not, like one or two seals. It sounds like you had a much better experience taking a cab out to that cove. Jacob also went out to San Diego for Comic-Con with us. He arrived a day early, and he did a similar thing. He went and saw some animals somewhere else. Jacob, tell us about it.
Yeah, I had such a great time going to San Diego early that I'm going to do a vacation next year where I take a few days off, go early with my wife, pre-Comic-Con, see the rest of the city. Because when that city's not choked with nerds, it's a really fun place. But I went to San Diego Zoo, which I've been told by many people, family members, friends, the internet, that's the best zoo in the world. And I feel it's hard to argue. It's so beautifully maintained. The entire thing is also a botanical garden. So even every path you walk down is surrounded by trees and bushes and landscaping, and so many animals. Like I spent hours and hours and hours there until my feet hurt. And I didn't even scratch the surface of being able to luxuriate and spend my time and actually see everything. I had to skip certain exhibits I wanted to see just because I was so tired from actively exploring and taking my time and rotating between rushing and taking my time based on what I was looking at. And I had such a blast. I mean, it's a little expensive to get in. It's $50-something, but I feel like I got my money's worth.
It's huge. It's like the size of most theme parks, or bigger than even. It's like they have like a gondola system that will take you from one side to the other. That's how big it is.
Yeah, the gondola system is terrifying, by the way. I'm normally okay with heights and theme park rides, but that gondola was more terrifying than any roller coaster I've ever been on. And yeah, it was a great place to get lost. I mean, when I first got there, I was like, there's no central hub. There's no like easy urban design layout. How do I navigate this park? And I realized, oh, the point is not to navigate. The point is to get lost. So getting lost at San Diego Zoo is something I recommend to anybody visiting that city. And on the opposite end of the spectrum, when Comic-Con was wrapping up, after everybody else had left the city or was on their way home, I hit up the show floor one more time. Because that's when all the vendors start realizing they need to start selling things quickly, or they have to pay to ship everything back. So I managed to buy $500 worth of Marvel omnibuses, which are huge hardcovers, for $100. By saying, I want these, can you give me a deal on them? I did the math. It was like $500 for all of them normally, and I said $100 just to get them off the table. So I went home with a couple thousand pages of more Marvel comics to read over the next few months.
That is insane. Those things are huge. I think that's probably more than just a couple thousand pages. Yeah. Okay, Brad, what have you been up to?
Well, I was at Comic-Con as well, so I've been pretty busy on that front. But besides that, I did enjoy canceling my Movie Pass. I have been so upset with the service that they've been providing. I've been upset with all of the changes that they've been instituting, especially the recent surge pricing. It was extremely frustrating. and that was basically the last straw for me. So I canceled it this month, and while I'm here in Los Angeles, hanging out at Slash Film headquarters, aka Peter's place of residence, I signed up for AMC A-List, and I used it at a nearby AMC theater, and the experience has been pleasing so far. It's easy to just go on through the AMC app and find your seat and buy your ticket, and you get your concessions, discounts, and whatnot, and it's just, so far I'm very pleased with it. Don't have any problems. We'll see how that continues as I keep using it for movies. But just from the outside looking in, it looks like it's going to be pretty satisfying. It seems like it might not be, since it's only 3 movies a week, but very rarely do I see more than 3 movies a week. And even though it's $20 a month, the price still makes so much sense. After I see 2 movies in a given month, it's basically worth the price that it costs to pay each month. So I'm hoping that it sticks around, and that's something that works out for AMC, because it's working better than MoviePass, in my opinion.
And you're not worried that you canceled your MoviePass and you won't be able to subscribe to the service for, 9 months?
No, not in the least, simply because I've been a subscriber to MoviePass for 6 years, since before they even dropped their price down to $10. I've been a member since they were charging anywhere between $25 and $60 for their service, depending on what market you were living in. And so for a while, I was paying $35 a month, and I was still getting my money's worth out of it. So the fact that I can't go back to MoviePass now and deal with the surge pricing, where people are paying, $5 to $6 for their, quote unquote peak time movie tickets, I'm completely fine with not worrying about that.
By the way, not to derail this podcast, but I often do, and I will. This whole surge pricing is ridiculous. Like, when you take Ubers or Lyfts, the idea of surge pricing makes sense. They have less drivers out there, and there's more demand, so they're giving the drivers more money because, the demand outweighs the supply. In this case, MoviePass it doesn't work in that same way. I think I saw some people online this weekend complaining that they were being offered a surge price of like $5, and in their market it was like an $8 movie. So they were basically only getting $3 off by having MoviePass. That's just insane. But anyways, let's move on. HT, what have you been up to?
So this weekend, my friend wrote a play called Heartbreak Hitman, and it debuted at DC's annual Capitol Fringe Festival. So the Capitol Fringe Festival is sort of an annual arts and more like play-centric festival that celebrates and supports rising playwrights and other such artists. And this is my friend's first play. Her name is Lee Jan Greco, and it's actually based off of a true story that she heard on NPR one day. And it's about a guy who gets hired to break people up. And it's kind of a reverse Hitch. And it's really fun, really witty, really fast-paced dialogue. And she had a premiere on Friday, and it's going until the 29th. So if you're in DC and you happen to be wanting to go see something for a night, and maybe take your girlfriend along or boyfriend along to see a play about people breaking people up, it's really fun, and it's a great way to experience the Capitol Fringe Festival in DC. So that was the first thing I did this weekend, and then I also celebrated Tu Zo, which is a Vietnamese sort of tradition in which we celebrate like the death anniversaries of some of our ancestors. I actually wrote a little bit about this tradition in my write-up for Coco, because the Day of the Dead is sort of reminiscent of this tradition that we have in Vietnam, except it's with Zo, it's celebrating specifically a specific person's death. So it's not all in one day like it is for Day of the Dead. And so for us, it was my maternal grandfather and my paternal grandmother. And they both happen to fall on the same day. And these are not solemn occasions at all. They're days in which we all gather for a big sort of family reunion, and we cook the favorite dishes of that ancestor, that dead relatives that they used to have, and have put it on an altar and sort of remember their life and their legacy and everything. And actually, when I wrote that Coco piece and my family all read it and went to see Coco together, that film actually impacted us a lot in the way that we celebrate Zoe. And that was because Zoe was always kind of a thing that we did, and it was kind of a necessity. But now we're making more concerted efforts to sort of keep the legacy of our relatives and of our ancestors. And it's really interesting how that movie has impacted us so much so that, like, my uncle, for example, is trying to write a book about one of my grandfather when he first moved to America. So it's amazing that that movie made such an impact, and it's really great to see that happen and do that with Zoe every time, which is always a good time just to see family and eat a lot of great Vietnamese food.
Very cool. And it should be mentioned that fringe festivals take place in a lot of big metropolitan cities. So if you live near one, I would venture to say, Google and see if there's a fringe festival near you. It's always worth checking out the local artists doing their things. What have I been up to? Last night, while Brad went to go see a press screening, I ventured to the Magic Castle, which I haven't been in a couple weeks, to see the Future Stars Magic Week, which basically is the oldest anybody who can perform there during this week is 21 years old. So it's all teenagers. Usually you have to be 21 to get into the castle, but it's all younglings performing. Watching them perform and being so much better than I probably ever will be is very humbling, and I think our Comic-Con crew can attest. I've been trying to practice this move called the Anaconda, which is kind of like this dribble between your hands you dribble cards between your hands, and you dribble it in a motion that the cards go vertical, almost like it looks like a snake. And I do it really poorly. I don't know what I was doing wrong. All during Comic-Con, I was trying, while I was waiting in lines and stuff, I was trying to practice it. And, within minutes of coming into this, the Future Stars Magic Week, there was, I want to say probably a 17 or 18-year-old girl who, was performing it 5 billion times better than I can do. And I asked her for advice, and she gave me some key advice that, has improved my, Anaconda. I'm still not up to her level, but very humbling experience indeed. And I wanted to use this opportunity to plug a movie that I love, a documentary called Make Believe. It's produced by Seth. Who's the King of Gongkai? Anybody?
Seth Gordon.
Gordon, yes. Seth Gordon, who made King of Kong and some The Horrible Bosses and some bad comedies. But anyways, this is a documentary. It tells the story of every year they have this teen magic competition in Vegas, hosted by Lance Burden, and some contestants came from Magic Castle's teen organization. It's not a boring documentary. It's, if you've ever seen Spellbound or anything like that, one of those competition documentaries, it's kind of in the fun and emotion of those kind of things. I would highly recommend checking out Make Believe. But let's move on to what we've been reading. Jacob, you've been traveling. You always have a book with you. What have you been reading?
Well, for the past couple of years, or maybe a year and a half, I've made a habit of anytime I fly, I always bring a book by Lee Child with me. It's for two reasons. One, Lee Child is a very easy read, and when you're 6'4" on an airplane, you want something very easy to distract you because you're in constant pain for the entire flight. And concentrating on anything that requires a lot of effort is genuinely difficult. But also, Lee Child is incredibly entertaining. He writes the Jack Reacher books, of which they made 2 film adaptations starring Tom Cruise. And every time I fly, I go pick up the next one in the series. And I'm reading them chronologically, starting with the first one released in 1997. And I'm on book 6 right now. And they're just incredibly entertaining. I really, really love the first Jack Reacher movie, the sequel not so much. And that's what encouraged me to check these out. But they're definitely their own flavor. The movie's not a perfect adaptation of them. It's the best way to describe them is if you imagine an old 60s and 70s style anthology show where the hero wanders into a town, solves a problem, and leaves. Think Incredible Hulk, Fugitive, Quantum Leap. It's pretty much those. I mean, literally, one of the books I read ends with the bad guy's house on fire, the girl saved, the kid reunited with her mother, the cops in the way, and Jack Reacher nods his head, sticks out his thumb, and starts taking away. That's literally how one book ends. And Lee Child, he knows he's writing pulp. On Twitter, I described him as the William Shakespeare of violence because nobody writes action scenes like he does. Nobody writes arms breaking and neck snapping and gunfights like he does. And I really like Jack Reacher himself as a hero because he's this very much a wish fulfillment character for male readers. He's 6'4", 300 pounds of pure muscle, but he's also like respectful of women and like really righteous and always correct. Like you can always tell a character in a Jack Reacher book is a villain or a secret villain because they don't believe Jack Reacher when he tells them the truth. Because he's always right and people are always impressed with him whenever he's right. And they're just really fun and I enjoy them a lot. And they're sometimes problematic. I feel like Lee Child, being a man in his 60s at this point, is not the most up to speed on what's okay for certain things that happen in certain books. Sometimes he fridges women. Sometimes he writes things that I don't think are intended to be sexist, but maybe come off that way to a modern reader. But there's no getting around how fun they are. And I'm enjoying reading them in order because Jack Reacher ages in real time. So on book 6, it's been 5 years since the first book, and he's now in his 40s instead of his 30s. And it reminds me of Sherlock Holmes, where he aged in real life as Arthur Conan Doyle wrote him. So at some point, Jack Reacher's going to be an old man. I love the thought of old man Jack Reacher still traveling around the country getting in fights. It's so fun to me.
Very cool. And let's move on to what we've been watching. Ben, you saw a few movies this week. What did you watch?
Yeah, my wife is a really big fan of The Secret Life of Walter Mitty, which is Ben Stiller's 2013 movie. We watched this. This is, I think, probably her maybe fourth time seeing it, and I think it might only be my second time all the way through, maybe third. And I remember when I first saw the movie in theaters, I was not crazy about it because I thought that the product placement was really distracting. But knowing that this time and trying to actively put that out of my mind, I was able to appreciate the movie a little bit more. It's a very earnest movie. I don't know if you guys have ever seen this or have any positive feelings about this movie, but I think it worked a lot better for me this time around than it has in times past. Like I said, Ben Stiller is just like a very earnest filmmaker. You can tell he's genuinely trying and he you can sense him behind the camera that he is a guy who has empathy for his characters, and he really he cares a lot, and that shines through. Also, the movie is really gorgeously shot, and there are some really, really cool editing transitions that happen in it. So I don't know, it might be worth another watch if anybody maybe wasn't crazy about it the first time around.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say. He's very stylistic, and because that earnestness, I think it results in a very divisive response to his movies, I think.
Yeah, Jacob. Chime in. Yeah, but I want to agree with you heavily on this because I don't love this movie, but there is such technical craft on display in this movie from behind the camera that I think when Ben Stiller gets a script that I love, I'm excited to see what he does because he's clearly a filmmaker. He's clearly a guy who's spent decades acting and watching how directors work, and he knows what he's doing behind the camera. So I'm excited for him to get a movie that I actively, truly love because he clearly has chops.
Yeah, for sure. The other thing, one of the other things I was watching was Annihilation. I rewatched this film because my wife Amy had never seen it, and we got it on through the Netflix Blu-ray subscription plan or whatever that I still, have them mail me discs. And man, this movie is just as good as it was the first time I saw it. I'm glad that it was very high up on my best of the year so far list. It just sort of I guess proved itself once again in my mind as being just a stellar piece of filmmaking. And I think, it's weird, with thrillers and stuff, a lot of times once you know what happens, the physiological responses tend to go away, and when you watch them again. But this time my stomach was just in knots, and my heart was beating just as fast as it was when I saw it in the theater for the first time. And at the end, when the movie finally gets to its really like enigmatic conclusion, I was just as mesmerized as I was the first time. So I really love this film, and I think if you haven't seen it and you've heard us raving about it, do whatever you have to do to go see this movie. It certainly won't be for everybody, but I think there's so much. I mean, like Walter Mitty, there's so much technical craft on display there that it's definitely worth checking out. And we've probably talked enough about that movie on this podcast before, where I don't need anybody else to agree with me there, because I think everybody pretty much does. And then finally, I watched North by Northwest, which also my wife had never seen. I just go through Turner Classic Movies on my DVR and just randomly DVR a bunch of classics that either I haven't seen since I was 12 or 13 years old, or just ones that I've never seen, period. And I just let a bunch of them build up, and then just try to go through and cross them off and re-examine a lot of these films that are in like the official film canon, or unofficial film canon, I guess. North by Northwest I hadn't seen since I was 12 or something like that. And man, this is just a really solid thriller. It's Hitchcock to the nth degree. Cary Grant is very suave and Cary Grantish in the film. I found it really strange to see a very, very young Martin Landau in this movie, and knowing him primarily from his work in much later in his career, like when he played Bela Lugosi and Ed Wood. It was sort of shocking to see him as like somebody who is approximately our age. And he's very tall and spindly and really creepy looking, and he plays a really great like number 2 bad guy in this movie. And yeah, the stuff at the end, like the Mount Rushmore sequence, the chase and all of that, is all largely pretty well executed for 1959. I mean, they didn't have like the full extent of green screens, obviously, that we do now. But yeah, it's still that movie holds up pretty well, I think. So just wanted to give a quick shout out to North by Northwest.
Very cool. It's a classic. You guys all talked about Won't You Be My Neighbor so much that I had to finally see it. I saw it at my local AMC theater with Brad. It was he saw it for his second time since Sundance. And this movie is as inspiring and emotional. It's everything you guys said it was going to be. A few thoughts on it, though. I think Jacob brought up that, there was someone in the documentary, I think a friend early on, that basically asked the question, how much of an impact has Mr. Rogers had on our world? And as inspiring of a documentary as this is, it's kind of depressing. I guess modern times, it's kind of depressing to think that maybe he hasn't had as big of an impact as maybe he should have. I don't know. Maybe that's the cynic in me. In the place and time we are in. It's also interesting that he. Something I didn't know is he was a lifelong Republican. And it's so interesting to me, living in the times that we live in, or even, the last 15, 20 years, not like recent times, that a lot of the stuff that Mr. Rogers stood for, and a lot of stuff Fred Rogers fought for, is totally, like, I think on the opposite side of right-wing ideals. And it's just so crazy to me to think that he was a Republican. I know he was a Republican in different times. But yeah. I would highly recommend this documentary. See it, bring some tissues, and it's definitely worth seeing. And I have also been watching on Showtime the Sacha Baron Cohen series, Who is America? I'm not going to say this is as good as his previous movies or TV shows. The characters that he portrays in this show are not very compelling in my mind. But the show is all about getting, people in office to say and do things that they shouldn't be doing. And there was like a scene in this most recent episode where I think it was an elected official, like he gets an elected official to racistly imitate a Chinese man and shout the N-word. over and over again. And I almost had to rewind the show to be like, wait, this guy's an elected official doing this? I do realize that, you know, a show like this is a big production that, you know, you've seen these comments from these people that appear on the show saying how they've been duped and stuff. And it's not that I feel for them in any way, but obviously they are being tricked, and there's a camera in front of you, and you're on the spot. Again, not giving them any leeway here, because they're saying things that I would never say in front of a camera, or not even in front of a camera. But do you know what I mean? Like, there would be no point that you could trick me into saying these things. But I'm almost like with Sacha Baron Cohen stuff, I'm almost more fascinated by how these things come together than the actual thing itself. Like, I would love to see a documentary showing how they, you know, did this, how they pulled this off, you know, how a show like this is written. Nathan Fielder directed this latest episode. Brad, you watched it over my house. This is the first episode you've seen. What did you think of it?
Yeah, well, just to clarify too, Nathan Fielder didn't direct the entire episode. He was one of the directors of of one of the segments during the episode. But yeah, this was previously I had only seen the first or 10 minutes of the first episode that was released online because I don't subscribe to Showtime. But we watched the entire second episode, and it's just it's simultaneously shocking but also not surprising to see, you know, elected officials and people who are supposed to be, you know, respected and you know, have significant power in certain places behave this way. It's just like for half this episode I was just like laughing in shock and like staring with my mouth wide open and like hiding my face because I couldn't believe that this, you know, people behave like this, especially Jason Spencer, the Georgia lawmaker, who probably was the worst person on this episode. But it's just, yeah, I love Sacha Baron Cohen for like exploiting the, you know, things like this and like showing how people really are. And it's just amazing to me that these people do this in front of a camera, like knowing full well this is going to be something that is seen by people. Like, I can't even fathom like being asked to say these things, let alone like actually following through with some of the stuff that they do. And kudos to Sacha Baron Cohen too for being able to even hold his composure, because like, if this guy did some of the stuff in front of me, I don't know if I would be able to like keep myself composed and stay dedicated to it without just like laughing at him for being just a complete moron. It's just, yeah, it's so crazy to see the kind of stuff that he is able to get on camera. I don't know. It's wild.
Jacob, you have been revisiting the Mission Impossible series. Tell us about it.
Yeah, I've edited and currently editing and will be editing many Mission Impossible posts this week on slashfilm.com, so I figured I might as well refresh my memory, at least on the films that I like the most. So I watched Mission Impossible 3 last night. I'm going to watch 4 and 5 tonight, and we'll see about 2. We'll see if I find the time for that mess. But revisiting Mission Impossible 1, what I love the most about this movie is that director Brian De Palma took this big Hollywood job and made a Brian De Palma movie. It has everything you expect out of his films, just at a bigger budget with movie stars. And seeing this kind of strange auteur who's been making these sort of grimy, sleazy thrillers in the 70s and 80s apply that aesthetic to a Tom Cruise movie is really fascinating. And the movie really works. And De Palma never really went back to making movies this big again. He's kind of fallen into obscurity in recent years. But it makes you wonder what alternate timeline do we have where Brian De Palma followed the path of his old friend Scorsese and kept on making big movies and like working with studios well into his 70s? Because this movie proved that he can make a Brian De Palma movie at a massive budget with Tom Cruise in the lead, and that's so cool and so exciting. Mission Impossible 3, I don't love it as much. I think J.J. Abrams is still finding his voice here. I mean, I agree with those who think it looks like a TV show. It's shot almost entirely in medium close-ups. He hasn't learned how to use the frame yet. And by Star Trek and Force Awakens, he's learned the power of iconic imagery and how to fill a frame and how to use widescreen to strong effect. But even with Mission Impossible 3 not looking great, compared to other films in this series. It has a relentless energy that I love. It has that J.J. Abrams wit, that J.J. Abrams intensity that just powers you through it and keeps things going. And I think these are both such fun movies. I mean, I've been on the record saying I prefer 4 and 5, but 1 and 3 are no slouches. They're a ton of fun. And also, I just haven't seen Fallout yet, but I know the next person we speak to has seen Fallout.
Yes, Brad, you went and saw Mission Impossible Fallout on Monday night. What did you think?
Yes, I have been so excited to see this movie ever since the first reaction started coming out, since the film screened before Comic-Con. It was torture not to be able to see it so soon, and I've been waiting with great anticipation, and the movie did not disappoint. It is like action filmmaking at its finest. Chris McQuarrie knows how to orchestrate some very well-crafted and incredibly exciting action sequences. There's a moment in the middle of the movie where it's just a non-stop back-and-forth chase that is reminiscent of the middle of The Dark Knight, where there's the chase between the Joker and Batman, and when the Joker's trying to get Harvey Dent, and there's just a constant barrage of action that's happening. Tom Cruise is a beast. There's no other actor like him working and putting in the kind of dedication to this performance and these stunts. And what I like about this movie too is, aside from the big set pieces and stunts that you expect, it also digs in a little bit to the emotional core of Ethan Hunt and like how much he cares about the people around him and how conflicted he is about choosing to be an IMF agent as opposed to having a personal life. We really get a nice piece of that, especially through some of the supporting characters as well. And I was so impressed by this movie. I can't wait to see it again. It is when you sometimes you see the cheesy quotes where people say it's a nonstop thrill ride. This movie really is that. Like, it is. There are things that where it's happened, and like the way sequences continue, you're laughing because you're like, oh my god, this is so crazy. Like, I can't believe this is still happening. But it's so great. I'm excited to see it again. And also, on a weird note, Jonathan Lipnicki happened to sit next to me during the press screening, which was just kind of odd.
Wait, for those who don't know, who is that?
That is the little boy from Jerry Maguire, who is now a grown man in his 20s.
I don't know how you would recognize him. I would have,
because there was at one time there was one of those BuzzFeed stories that goes around that's like, hey, remember so and so? Well, now they're super hot.
And you took note of that, of course. Okay, so what else have you been watching?
I also got a chance to see Death of Stalin on my flight out to Comic-Con. We recorded the Water Cooler episode just before I flew out there, so it's a little bit of an old watch, but it was available on my flight. And if I would have seen this movie before we did our halfway point list of our favorite movies of 2018 so far, this would have been somewhere on my list. It is hilarious. I love Armando Iannucci's work on Veep, and I love In the Loop, and he brings that level of wit and hilarity to the time in history, when Stalin died and Russian power was being transferred. And what's so cool about this movie, and it makes it even funnier too, is that all of the characters, these are all Russian characters too, aren't played with silly Hollywood Russian accents. They're all played by, British, Irish, and some American actors, and they're all just doing their normal voices. Steve Buscemi doesn't put on an accent, Jeffrey Tambor doesn't put on an accent or anything like that. And it's not really distracting at all, and if anything, it just adds to the authenticity of the performances, and it makes the comedy that much stronger, because none of these actors in this movie are doing anything broad or trying to get laughs. They're putting in genuine performances that make the proceedings that much funnier. And I think that's what made me laugh so much, is it plays, so real that you don't care that Steve Buscemi is playing, Nikita Khrushchev as just, an American guy, essentially. And it's just, if you get a chance to watch it, I think that you'll, if you like, fast talking, witty, sharp comedies, then you'll really enjoy this.
Chris, you also saw Mission Impossible Fallout. What was your reaction?
I loved every minute of it. I actually went so far as to add this to my top 10 of the year. This movie rules. It's fantastic. I still think I like Rogue Nation just a little bit more, but the energy of this film is... I can't remember the last time I saw a film that was so like relentlessly entertaining. Like it wants to entertain you every single second, and it succeeds. And continuing on what Brad said about the emotional stuff, this film actually kind of rehabilitates Ethan Hunt because, and I wrote about this in my very lengthy Mission Impossible piece, but I felt like Rogue Nation finally tried to address who Ethan Hunt was as a person, and they pretty much boiled it down to he's a crazy person who doesn't care about anyone or anything except winning. And I feel like maybe they realized that was the wrong way to go, and in this film they go out of their way to say multiple times like what a good person Ethan Hunt is. And that sounds like it might be forced, but it actually really works, and I was surprised at how well it works. And I don't know. This is definitely like the best movie of the summer. Like no other movie is going to top this. Not even The Meg. I'm sorry, but it's phenomenal. And as I was walking out, I saw some people being like, that wasn't that good. I wanted to like hit them over the head with a cartoon mallet. Like, get out of here. This movie is fantastic. So yeah, Mission Impossible Fallout rules. I drove home blasting that stupid Imagine Dragons song from the trailer, even though I don't even like them. That's how pumped I was.
And you also saw another movie this week?
Yes, I watched Rampage on Blu-ray, the Dwayne Johnson monster movie. And why is that movie so bad? I don't understand. I watched it, and it's like relentlessly dark. And if you're making a movie based on a video game starring Dwayne Johnson and CGI monsters, it shouldn't be dark and serious. It should be a fun movie. And like every step of the way, this movie is going for really like dark and serious stuff, like right down to like really very serious music. And I just it bothered me. I was expecting a fun romp, and I got like misery for an hour and a half.
Yeah, I love Dwayne Johnson. I don't understand what he's doing and the filmmakers he's choosing to make his movies with. I wish he had a better selection of projects because he is so likable and enjoyable, but the films he's choosing just are not that. HT, what have you been watching?
So I'm one of the few people on this team who doesn't get access to a lot of early screenings, but I got to go to 2 last week. Not for any big ones like Mission Impossible Fallout, but I saw Searching and Blind Spotting early. So Searching is a movie starring John Cho, and it's a movie that Ben has been raving about since he saw it at Sundance, and it deserves all that praise.
Ben's been talking about this movie, Searching?
Oh, yeah. I had no idea. Yeah, so it's a movie starring John Cho, and it's a film that's told entirely through computer and phone screens, sort of in the vein of Unfriended. And while that sounds like a gimmick, it actually works really well for the kind of story that it tells. So John Cho stars as a dad whose daughter goes missing, and you see the case kind of unfold as he finds out more about his daughter, and more twists and turns get involved. And it's really suspenseful. It's so taut. It's so well constructed that the whole structure on the screen never feels once like a gimmick, which is astonishing, honestly. There are some parts where they have to stretch it a little bit, and you kind of get out of the movie for a little bit because of that. But otherwise, you're just like on the edge of your seat the entire time. And John Cho is amazing. Everyone in this film is really naturalistic in their acting, except for I think Deborah Messing, who feels stilted in a way that I think kind of made sense for a character, but was a little bit odd for me. But I really liked this film. It's so good and one of the best suspense films I've seen recently. And I highly recommend it. It comes out in theaters in August. So, and then another movie I saw was Blind Spotting, which also took me by surprise. It's a film that stars Daveed Diggs of Hamilton fame, and he plays an ex-con who's in the final 3 days of his probation, but then on the last day of his probation, he witnesses a police officer shoot an unarmed black man. And it kind of spirals from there, in which he has kind of comes to terms with and interrogates like the like issues of gentrification, of racism, of police, of racial profiling and stuff, all within the span of these 3 days. And it takes place in Oakland, and it feels so lived in, and is actually shot at the same time as Sorry to Bother You, which also was took place in Oakland as well, and I think shot like in similar locations. And they both offer these really different but really essential, I think, portrayals of Oakland. And it's just so good. It's so fraught. It's funny too, and it's just it's really powerful in a way that kind of Sorry to Bother You is, but in a very different sort of manner. And Daveed Diggs is phenomenal in this film. There are some parts. This won't be a spoiler, but there's parts in the film where he sort of bursts into like these long sort of rap dialogues. He raps his dialogue, and they often come at these really peak emotional climaxes, and it works so amazingly well that you, in the way that you wouldn't think it works. It's so good. I recommend Blind Spotting a lot. It's one of my favorite films I've seen this summer so far, and it's really good.
You saw something else as well, right?
Yes. So this is a movie that just appeared on Netflix recently. Netflix really needs to do a better job of promoting its non-original films, by the way, because this movie got dropped unceremoniously on Netflix. And it's Mary and the Witch's Flower, which is an animated film directed by Hiromasa Yonebayashi, who was a former Studio Ghibli animator. He directed The Secret World of Arrietty. That was the title, right? Yes, The Secret World of Arrietty, which is one of the last Ghibli films. And this is his first film with the new studio called Studio Ponoc. And it's based on The Little Broomstick by Mary Stewart. It's a really lovely, charming film about this girl who kind of gets swept up into this magical world of witches and a wizarding and like a witch academy. And it kind of hits a lot of the familiar beats of a lot of Studio Ghibli films. I recognize some sort of narrative structures as well as some even familiar scenes in a way that I was kind of like, oh, Yonebayashi is kind of leaning into the Studio Ghibli namesake a little bit, but it's still really beautifully animated and really charming that I recommend it a lot.
Okay, let's move on to what we've been eating at Comic-Con. Brad and I went to Taco Bell in the year 2032 for a promotion, a cross promotion with Demolition Man. Brad, tell us about it.
Yeah, so for whatever reason, Taco Bell decided to make good on the inspiration that Demolition Man provided in a fictional future where Taco Bell wins something called the Franchise Wars and becomes the only restaurant that exists, at least in the area of San Angeles, the merged metropolis of San Diego and Los Angeles. And so as part of a cross-promotion for bringing back their nacho fries, they decided to create an installation at Comic-Con where they recreated a futuristic Taco Bell from the year 2032 and turned it into a fine dining experience featuring Taco Bell food. This was a very surreal installation because they used a real like steakhouse that exists in San Diego and just made it over a little bit with Taco Bell, decorations, futuristic things. They had a neon sign in the middle of the restaurant. They had a bunch of framed paintings that looked like the future of Demolition Man, where Taco Bell was always featured. They had shirts on sale featuring the futuristic Taco Bell logo, a shirt that said "Be Well" and Taco Bell. Another one that says "Greetings from San Angeles," and you sit down just as if you were at a fancy restaurant, and they brought out a 4-course meal for you to partake in, featuring the food was described in a very futuristic way. Like, for example, the first course they bring out, which was directly inspired by Demolition Man, was called the Joy Joy hors d'oeuvre, and it's described as having masa geometrics, corn 4, legumes, fungi, tomato aspic, onion soirais, avocado, and cilantro and capsicum. And along with that, there was a few, like I said, 3 other courses, and it was all real Taco Bell food for the most part, just presented in a much more upscale, fancy way, with like sauce drizzles, and just presented in a very visually pleasing
like those nacho fries were presented in like this dry ice container, so like there was like fog coming out of it.
Yeah, and then like they gave us those cinnamon twists that they have, but they included this really tasty like sweet cream sauce that you could dip them in. And then like they had part of the aesthetic of it was they also had a piano guy who was there playing music live, and he played pop rock hits from the 70s and 80s, but just like the movie, he also played commercial jingles. And then they also had a machine out front that was give you morality violations, and so I got one of those. I violated the auditory morality statute for listening to immoral music or uncensored mini tunes.
And also, we should mention in the bathroom the 3 seashells.
Indeed, the 3 seashells were in the bathroom, but they were out of order, so we weren't able to use them properly.
Not that I would know how to use them. But let's move on very briefly. At Comic-Con, we were in a hotel room without a refrigerator. We stocked up on food at the local grocery store for the convention, and I bought a thing of bagels. And because we didn't have a refrigerator, I didn't have any spread, no butter, no cream cheese. So every morning I was eating bagels without any spread on them. And apparently that has divided the Slash Film staff, half of which think I am a monster for eating bagels not toasted without any kind of spread, and those who think that is the right way of eating them. So I thought, very briefly, if you guys could sound off. Brad, let's start with you.
If you're eating a bagel dry, all you're doing is having basically the equivalent of 4 slices of dry bread, which is insane. A good bagel needs to have cream cheese on it, or at the very least, butter with some jelly. If you want to be even, have a little bit more excitement, put a little bit of cream cheese and jelly on it. Make it even tastier. But eating a bagel dry is the definition of insanity.
Okay, first of all, this is an everything bagel. There's some taste to it. It's not just eating 4 slices of bread. HT, am I insane?
Yes, you are. Because bagels are already loaded with carbs. They're such a dense bread that you might as well just go all the way and actually enjoy this meal instead of eating this piece of dry cardboard. I think that Brad already described as that, but I'm going to double down on that because I cannot eat bagels without at least some cream cheese. One time, my roommate finished all my cream cheese, and I was so angry that I left a passive-aggressive note. And so that's how passionate I am about cream cheese. Eat it with cream cheese or some other beautiful, accoutrement, because that's what bagels are made for. That's why they're flat. They're made for toppings.
Well, I'm in creative circumstances here. We don't have a refrigerator. I don't know what bagels you guys are eating. It's not like I'm eating New York City bagels, but none of the bagels I have ever eaten taste like cardboard. Jacob, am I insane?
Well, I'm just going to say 3 names. Adolf Hitler, Idi Amin, Peter Sciretta. This is a truly monstrous thing you've done, Peter, and I'll never forgive you for it. But in all seriousness, I believe a bagel cut in half, crisped brown, with butter and a little bit of jalapeno jelly is one of the greatest creations on earth. And the thought of that poor bagel being eaten soft and uncut and untreated with delicious toppings is one of the worst things I've ever heard in my life, Peter. You should be ashamed of yourself.
Ben, I need you to stick up for me here. Like, this is not crazy.
So, Peter, I would stick up for you, except the untoasted thing. That's really where I draw the line. I'm actually okay with
have
eating
toasters at a hotel. What do you guys...
Don't buy bagels then, Peter. Don't buy bagels. Don't access to a toaster.
Well, what am I supposed to eat for breakfast before I run out to go to panels at Comic-Con then?
Pop-Tarts or something? I don't know. Yeah, it's...
Wait, you eat your Pop-Tarts untoasted? What a monster.
I can eat Pop-Tarts untoasted. I prefer them toasted, I think, but yeah, it's I would much rather eat an untoasted Pop-Tart than an untoasted bagel. But for anybody out there, I actually will eat just a bagel plain as long as it's toasted. I have no problem doing that. I feel like toasted it tastes more like cardboard than untoasted. If you don't have any spread on it. I guess that's up for debate, Peter. I think my preference is to put a slice of like deli meat, like ham, on it, and sharp cheddar cheese. And see, now you're making a sandwich, bagel sandwich. Yeah, it's legit. But okay, but yeah, I would definitely go toasted plain. I have no problem with that. Chris, we haven't heard from you. What do you say on Bagelgate?
There is literally nothing wrong with a plain untoasted bagel, and the fact that you all have this very hard stance on it makes me question what's wrong with all of you. There's nothing wrong with it.
What's wrong with you, Chris?
Listen, if you can't enjoy a plain untoasted bagel, you're eating shitty bagels. That's all it boils down to. You're going to Shitty Bagels Are Us and getting really shitty bagels.
Oh, like we can't all go to the fancy upscale bagel factory you have in Philadelphia.
Look, a good bagel is not that expensive. They're very cheap to produce. Look,
you're from Cream Cheese Town. You're from Philadelphia. Why are you rebelling, Chris?
Listen, cream cheese is disgusting. First of all, I'm not going to put that on.
Yeah, straight to hell, sir.
Cheese is not meant to be creamed. It's just a strange combination.
Hell, that's a nacho cheese.
Tell that to Taco Bell. Jacob, what have you been eating?
I usually don't chime in here because I usually eat the same things over and over again in Austin. But visiting San Diego early, I managed to see and check out some restaurants. Based on the recommendation of my hotel concierge, I went to Breakfast Republic. This apparently very popular, very hip, relatively new breakfast place. Really good omelet, really incredible potatoes. Even the toast was good. And they had a homemade jelly that came with it, or a house-made jelly. It was a really strong, huge breakfast. I barely was able to tap into it before I was done. Then for lunch that day, I had Carnitas Snack Shack, this sandwich shop on the pier by the Midway, the old museum that they made out of an aircraft carrier. I had this ridiculous sandwich that was bread, pork, German sausage, I think, and other things. It was just ridiculous, and it was very good as well. But my big pleasant surprise, I went back here a few times, even during Comic-Con, I had to sneak away and go here, was La Puerta, this Mexican restaurant, or Tex-Mex restaurant located maybe about a 15-minute walk from the convention center. And really incredible margaritas, one of which was spiced with serrano peppers. I loved it. Really, really good salsa, really good chips made in-house, really good tacos. It's like just genuinely a good food. I'm from Texas, so my standards for this kind of food are high, but this did not let me down at all. I've tried a few other places. There was this place, even closer place to the convention center called Blind Burro, which was solid. It was good. It felt very touristy. It didn't have the unique flavors of La Puerta, but I enjoyed it well enough, even though they had a very strange queso that had potatoes in it, which I had never seen before. I think it was a better idea than it was executed. My last meal in San Diego was the worst. I was at a place called Serrano's that a Lyft driver recommended to me. And I should have known I should have left after my first margarita, which was just bad. But I said, maybe the food's good. And no, the food was not good. It was my first California burrito, which I didn't know was a thing. It's a burrito that has French fries in it. And I'm sure it's delicious. It was not
California burritos are awesome, Jacob.
I'm sure they are. I didn't like I said, I was excited at the concept, but this one was a very disappointing one. I look forward to going back to California and trying a proper one. This one was a letdown. I do want to say I did try to find some like place outside of the Gaslamp district, some places that are a bit more local favorites. So I wouldn't be playing tourist the whole time. But the one place I went to was let's see, Las Cuatro Milpas, this family-owned, small, dingy restaurant with a tiny menu, run by the same family for 30 years. Rave reviews, smelled delicious. Hour-long line to get into the door. I waited, got in, cash only. I only had a card. So sorry, San Diego. I tried. I tried to explore the outer edges of the city, but I failed in that end. But also, in between all this, I'm constantly drinking. If I wasn't at Comic-Con or working, I probably had tequila in my system. But that was my San Diego trip. It was great. Very delicious food for the most part.
Sounds good. Lastly, in the food section, Brad, what have you been eating?
Yes. Aside from going to the future of Taco Bell dining, when we got back to Los Angeles, after we had some brunch, we decided to partake in some dessert. And so we stopped at this place called Kettle Glazed, which was recommended by your girlfriend, Kitra, because apparently they're famous for making cruffins, which, if you know anything about the cronut, which is a donut crossed with a croissant, this is basically a croissant crossed with a muffin. And apparently they're famous for it. And so we got one of those and tried it, and it was pretty tasty. It was about exactly what you expect. It's, a croissant that's in the shape of a muffin. It's flaky and sweet and a little bit sticky, but it was very delicious. And we also had a couple of their regular donuts, too, which were also very tasty. So if you live in the Los Angeles area and you haven't been to Kettle Glazed, you should check that place out.
Okay, lastly, let's talk about what we've been playing. Jacob, what have you been playing on your Nintendo Switch?
I recently picked up Lumines, or specifically Lumines Remastered. I've been here with this game for a long time. The first edition of Lumines was on the PlayStation Portable, the handheld Sony device that nobody bought. But everybody I know who did own one said that they pretty much put Lumines in their system and it never left. It was the one game they played on PlayStation Portable for years, even after that system was abandoned. And playing on the Switch in a new version has been sort of spiffed up a bit, given a lot of options and different modes. I can see why. This is pretty much as someone said, let's take Tetris, take those core fundamentals that made Tetris a good game for decades, and just refresh it and make it into something new and exciting for a modern age. So it's blocks falling and you matching colors, but instead of doing lines across the stage, it is trying to create squares of 4 or more. And the game has this incredible visual style. It has amazing music that's blasting in your ears, and it is just intense. It rotates between being incredibly calming and incredibly white-knuckled, sweat pouring down your face intense, based on the stage, based on the music, based on the visual style of the stage you're in. And I played it at the airport until my battery died on my Switch, and it is $15 on the store, I believe. And it is, if you haven't played it before on a previous system, it's also available on PlayStation, Xbox, and PC in this new edition. And it is a phenomenal puzzle game. I can't recommend it highly enough.
Very cool. Brad, while you were in San Diego, you were also playing some games.
Yeah, so I found out that whenever there are bigger conventions that happen around the world, Niantic likes to increase the spawn rates for a certain Pokemon in Pokemon Go. Within the game, there's this Pokemon that is called an Unknown. It's basically a little black-like creature that has one eye, and it comes in 26 varieties that are all in the shape of the letters of the alphabet. And so because this was San Diego Comic-Con, all of the letters that spell out San Diego Comic-Con were available as unknowns that were spawning way more frequently than they normally do. This is a Pokemon that pretty much never spawns in the wild. It's extremely rare. I had never seen one in the wild before, and even in the Discord that I follow, only a couple people had ever spotted one, and they only spotted it because they were using trackers. So this was cool. I was able to get around 40 of them while I was at the convention, so I'll be using those for trades for things that I don't have yet, like regionals. So that was very cool. And then I also, while I was there, if you listen to our episodes during Comic-Con, you might have heard that I played Ghostbusters World. So I won't do a deep dive into that, but I will say it is a very cool evolution of the gameplay that Pokemon Go offers. It's another augmented reality game, but rather than catching Pokemon, you are a Ghostbuster and you capture ghosts. And it uses some of the same gameplay mechanics that Pokemon Go does, but it also incorporates some of the same from Jurassic World Alive. And for me, it kind of made it a little bit more exciting, especially because one of the cooler aspects of it is that, unlike the other two aforementioned games, it actually uses the Google Maps API to create 3D buildings around you, rather than just having a flat map that you're looking at with barely any discernible land features. So it makes it a little bit more immersive, and the gameplay requires a little more attention and skill, making it a much more engaging game to play. So there's no release date for that game yet, but it's expected to come out sometime before the end of the year.
Very cool.
I want to interject before you guys finish. I can't believe none of you guys who went to Comic-Con went and played Kingdom Hearts 3 specifically to tell me how amazing this game was, because I'm so jealous and I wanted to see it and play.
I didn't want to hurt your feelings, Ishi. I didn't want to come home and then say, like, look what I managed to do. That's why I avoided that section. I'm so sorry.
I mean,
Well,
I walked
you.
by it and I took a photo and I was going to send it to you, but I had no internet on the show floor, so I could not do that.
I didn't even make it over to the video game section of the show floor this year.
Crazy.
Right.
Okay, well, anyways, that brings us to the end of Slash Film Daily today. I will link to HG's Coco piece in the show notes. This podcast is published every weekday. You can find it on iTunes, Google Play, Overcast, Spotify, all the popular podcast apps, and slashfilm.com. Please go send us your feedback, questions, comments, concerns at peter@slashfilm.com. And they might make the mailbag like the letters today. Please go rate and review this podcast on iTunes. Tell your friends, spread the word, and we'll see you tomorrow.